Good evening. This is Indrajit Gupta, co-founder at Founding Fuel. This evening I'm in conversation with Mr. Rajat Gupta about his new book, Mind Without Fear, which is going to be published in March by Juggernaut. Good evening, Rajat. Welcome to Delhi. Been a pleasure to talk to you about your upcoming book on behalf of Founding Fuel, the venture that I represent. I wanted to start, Rajat, directly with the whole process of writing the book. And what sparked the idea? How long did it take? What were the most difficult phases, really?
So I had a fellow prisoner whose name is Manny, and I write about it in the book. He was a Haitian guy, a lawyer and a journalist, and from prison he used to write a column.
Right.
So as is customary, we would have meals together, we would walk around and so on. I got to know him, and then of course we exchanged life stories about who we are and so on. So then he told me, "You must write a book." I said, "I've not really thought about it, nor am I a book writer." So he said, "No, I'll help you." So he said, "You come to my cell," and he would say, let's write the outline."
Right.
So I would speak a little bit about what I would like to write, and he would write a little outline. Chapter 1 will be this, and then we would discuss, and he would make this, and we were making little scenes from that. He wanted, okay, what lessons did I learn? So I still have that notebook. It's a notebook that it's probably about 50 pages of different chapters and scenes and so on. So after we did that effort, I forgot about it. It was, we did it for a while and then ran out of steam.
Right.
And then Abhik was visiting the US, and he wrote to me and said he'd like to come.
This is Abhik Sarkar.
And so I said, "Please come, it will be wonderful to see you." And he said his daughter was also coming. I mean, I had met Chicky before, but I didn't really know her.
Sure.
So then they both come and we have a discussion about what's going on in prison and so on. And I said, these two, kind of journalistic people were here. So I said, "I'm thinking of writing a book." So they said, "Oh," Chicky said, "That's great, that's great." So she said, "You must write it." I said, "Okay, if you publish it, I will write it."
Right.
So that was a conversation.
Right.
Then I came out of prison and I kind of thought about it. It was in the back of my mind, but I was busy getting to reacquaint with my family, friends, and all that. And then one day Chicky calls and says, "What's your progress on your book?" I said, "Nothing." But what I did though was I had an editor very early on.
Right.
And I wrote an outline based a little bit on what was done in prison, but then I shifted it around, and it was a very detailed outline, like 50 to 70 pages with chapters, with scenes, with characters, and so on.
Right.
And I tried to write, but it was very difficult for me.
Right.
So I was all my life used to dictating to my secretary. Even if I wrote long letters, I dictated them.
Right.
So I said that's what I would do. So I would sit with the outline, I would dictate a chapter. And then Ellen Daly, who was my editor, would kind of take it and convert it into full sentences and add something here and there and send it back to me. And then I would re-edit it myself, make sure it's my voice.
Absolutely.
And also add a lot of anecdotes, little, incidents, little things. And if you read the book, you'll see that there are a lot of little anecdotes.
Yeah.
So that's how the book was written.
Nice. So how was the process in hindsight?
Because I had to set it aside for a while. I didn't feel like picking it up
Why is
again. It's painful in terms of many,
Surfaces of
relive memories. I got busy with something else and time would go by, or Ellen would send me a whole chapter and I was supposed to edit it or I wouldn't do it, and
Sure.
so there was times when I was actively avoiding it.
Right.
So the elapsed time was about 2 years, and moments of working on it very intensely.
Interesting. Well, there were two aspects in the book, and I'll touch upon the first one. I mean, the whole concept of equanimity, right,
Yeah.
that you speak about in the book. That's a very hard thing to achieve, the whole inner peace, when you go through such a gut-wrenching experience that you did. Have you really been able to find that inner peace as things stand?
It's difficult, and it's also very difficult for you to judge yourself whether you're there or not. But I tell you, it starts with I remember my father saying many times, you can never control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. So it's sort of like, how do you react to everything with grace, with forgiveness, with absence of anger. I learned that my father was ill-treated by the British, but he never spoke a word against them. It was... So you constantly want to, when I get emotions of anger or something like that, I just say, come on, it makes, Or I would say, if some great injustice was done to me, I'd say really, yes, I feel badly about it, but it reflects more on them than it reflects on me. The way they've done it, and the way they've behaved, or so and so. So it was a little bit of a dialogue within my own mind on how to achieve that state. It was great teachings, one of the great teachings of Gita also.
That's right. You spoke about a little while ago about directing your anger at and not at them. Who's the them in your mind?
Well, there are many, there are systems and people who let me down. It's well articulated in the book, I hope, and what I feel about that. It's all of those. I mean, if Anil Kumar testified against me, I had to think about, okay, he really should have not, because he knew nothing about the case.
Right.
And he was rehearsed to establish a certain context about my relationship with Rajaratnam, which was not quite accurate, but it's hard to.
Sure.
But he was compelled to do so, I think, because he cut a deal with the,
approval,
and so to me, it reflects on his character and on his, that he could come and testify, however, under whatever compulsion, against a very good friend and a mentor who had helped him all his life.
That's right.
So it reflects on him, not... Why should I don't need to get angry at him. That only upsets me.
I understand the Anil Kumar relationship and what you may have felt, but what about the system? Because I know that America, kind of created the foundations of your career. Gave you a great education at Harvard. You ended up with a job career at one of the most storied consulting firms in the world. But was there ever a trace of bitterness that crept in as far as what you went through?
As far as America is concerned, no.
Why is that?
Because I think America is still a great land of opportunity. It's the country where people from all over the world want to come. There's something in it. That's why they want to come there. Okay? So, and America helped me a lot. It made me in many ways. Clearly McKinsey made me, and I learned a lot from there. So this is not directed against America. America has a justice system which the flaws of which are actually well recognized and are written about a lot. I learned the underbelly of the justice system, and I think it's fundamentally flawed in many ways. There are many good things about it, but it is also fundamentally flawed. And I write a fair amount about it as to what the flaws are. And that, I want to work to reform it. I mean, to me, it's like, do I find it so bad that, I want to run away from there? No. Where would I find necessarily a better justice system? I'm not sure. I look from far at the Indian justice system. You're talking about Carlos Ghosn. I looked at the Japanese system, and I'm not sure where. So all in all, I'm nothing against America. I would dearly wish to reform the American justice system. I think some of the reform has started. Much needs to be done, both in terms of every aspect of it, from the prosecutors, from the prison system, from the appeal and court system and bail system, and just lots is wrong with it. I was a highly visible person with very little influence and power.
Sure.
They may not have to do with anything to do with my brown skin, but that I was not a sitting CEO. I was not politically active. I was, a whole set of things about that. About the jury, the jury was very much mainstream America. Very few people who understood business in it. Maybe one person had a little bit of a business background, so there were beauticians and babysitters and teachers and so on and so forth. And was there an element of, here's a very successful immigrant, how can he get so successful in just coming here to this country, and he has so much money, he must have done something wrong. Okay. I don't know how much of that was at play. I'm sure some of it was. On the other hand, half the jurors were crying when they passed the verdict. They related to me. I think they didn't want to convict me, but clearly the prosecutors outsmarted my defense.
Right.
And the jury instructions, and the judge was also very biased in the instructions and so on. I don't know the dynamics, but I can only judge by some
but at least there's no rancor. We kind of celebrate the achievements of, let's say, Sundar Pichai or Satya Nadella. They've risen to the very top, but then some would also argue that Silicon Valley is not mainstream American business. Do you believe that? And do you believe that from the time you started your career there to where we are today, that whole concept of a glass ceiling for immigrants or folks who are not typical classical WASPs, that has changed? That has fundamentally changed, has it?
I think so. I don't believe that there is a glass ceiling. I mean, clearly those two examples you mentioned are wonderful, but they're more recent. You can look at Indra Nooyi, she was at the top, and she's a woman with a brown skin, so there's no glass ceiling. There were many other CEOs before, when I became the head of McKinsey, I was perhaps the first one, but I didn't kind of sense that there was a glass ceiling. I never felt it. I don't feel it now. I think I gave all the credit to McKinsey for being open-minded enough to elect somebody like me. But McKinsey is a very special firm. It's a global firm with people from everywhere. But I give a lot of credit to America, where immigrants like us or Indra or Sundar or wherever can go and reach the very top.
Well, you've done incredible deeds in India as well. I mean, ISB, I've kind of watched it grow from 99 onwards. It is certainly a world-class business school out of India, which is what your aspiration was. You've done work with setting up PHFI as well. Have you ever kind of considered the idea of retiring here, settling down in India? How does the family look at it? How do you look at it?
And I think the answer to that is very simple, which is my children were born in America, they grew up in America, they are Americans. So if I want to be near my kids, I have to live in America. And yes, if I want to live near my kids and grandkids, which I want to do, I'm always going to be there. At the same time, I've always been in India. It's a country of my birth. I feel very connected to it. I always, come back here 4 or 5 times a year. I put lots of energies in creating the institutions, and they fortunately have been extremely successful and impactful, and I will continue to do that. So I feel like I am in both worlds. My kids are in America.
So I pick up that strand on the family, because I think one of the revelations for me when I was reading the book was really the kind of support and the emotional glue that the family provided you as well. Incredible. Now, what can one learn from that? Because I think there are lots of professionals, especially young professionals, who kind of committed to their career like you were many years ago, but somehow struggled to balance work and family. So what would you tell them from your own experience of what you've been through and how the family came through for you? And you've kind of almost avoided a family breakdown, because families do break down with kind of episodes of this kind, right? That didn't happen.
No. I mean, it's quite extraordinary the support I got from my family, including my 5-year-old grandkids visiting me every Friday, right after school. They would come to visit me in prison. I mean, think of 5-year-olds who might, who are driving an hour or more to come to visit me, sit in a little room, staying still and talking to their grandfather for 3 hours. That's not an easy thing for them to do, or for their mother to execute that. My kids visited me all the time. They were always there for me. Now, they claimed that I was missing in action much of my career. I don't think I was, but we have a disagreement. I did some things that, I had an incredibly hectic schedule and so on, but I tried to be home always on weekends. I never played golf. I didn't do any of the things you normally would associate. I kept as much as I could intact for my kids. I taught them math. I taught them reading. I worked with them as much as I could. Right. Should I have done more? Probably yes. Anita, who was gold medalist from IIT, worked at Bell Labs, and it was clear that both of us couldn't have, some people can manage. You don't have that support system. We didn't have grandparents. My kids didn't have any grandparents alive. So in that sense, she made a big sacrifice in terms of giving up her own career.
Right.
But I would say, set all that aside, it's not that I've been great to my family or haven't had problems. It's more to do with when it counted, they were there.
In fact, I wanted to pick up that whole issue of friendship. What has this period of upheaval really taught you about friendship? Because in your book, who is a true friend? Is that clear? Much more clearer now to you?
Much more clear. Yeah, absolutely.
What have friends really brought on and provided to you?
No, I think it's more, they don't, you get to know your true friends in times of adversity. There's no question about that. If I start naming names, I will leave some out, and I don't want to do that. But, there were friends who weren't judging me. Some of them in their heart might have felt, oh, maybe he didn't, do things that were right. Some people would even say that to me, but they were there for supporting me always. How are you feeling? How can I help? Don't worry about this, X, Y, Z, They were just, you could feel that they were there.
You raise the whole case of Adil Zainulbhai, and I'll bring it up for a reason, because you mentored him, he was heading the India business. But let me ask you, I mean, what would you have done if he were in the dock? What do you reckon you would have done?
The only thing I wrote about, which is if I was very well known in India, right? If McKinsey wanted to distance itself from me, it was completely legitimate, and I would tell them how to do it. The only thing I felt very disappointed about is that he didn't call me to say, this is what I need to do, and this is why I'm doing it. Because the moment he called somebody, they would call me back. And I didn't expect that people would call me and say, what is Adil doing? Why is he coming to tell me that you're no longer associated with McKinsey? I mean, I can read it in the newspaper. I mean,
Right. Fair enough.
I am very fond of it. It's not, I mean, I'm very fond of him. I've mentored him all my life. I still see him.
But Rajat, there is a price to pay as well, right? I mean, McKinsey didn't make it easy for people who did provide support, from what I've gathered.
I understand that is the case.
And
I thought that was very unfortunate. It's really against their values themselves.
What really transpired, do you reckon? I mean, what did you hear?
I don't know.
You've written about it in the book,
Yeah.
saying that they knocked you off.
I was very hurt. I mean, I was really hurt. I mean, I felt it was against McKinsey's core values. How do you, the principle of you're innocent till you're proven guilty, and you don't practice that at all. You start acting as if I was guilty from day one. McKinsey is known for its partnership values. We help each other. It's a global partnership. I always reinforced those partnership values, and I acted like a partner to all my partners. Mm-hmm. And when I was down, they kicked me in my face.
Right.
That's not a partnership.
That's right.
I spent 37 years there.
Absolutely. In fact, I just kind of moved to a period in McKinsey's history where you were kind of leading the firm, and that was a fairly significant period, and I kind of want to hear what was going on, especially during the first .com boom, because a lot of things came together at that time where I'm guessing younger partners wanted more to create more wealth. New business models or compensation models came up. Can you describe what was really going on? You've talked a bit about it in the book, but I was hoping if I could just understand the conversations that were going on about the firm's appetite for risk.
And so there were maybe three kind of important events that were interesting. One was there was a clamor amongst younger partners to create a private equity arm of McKinsey.
Yes, much like Bain Capital.
It was called Blue Capital.
Right.
We commissioned a study.
Okay.
I was the head of the firm. I was chairman of the board. Our shareholders committee, we used to call it. And so there was such a demand. I mean, such a urge. We should do it, etc. Look at Bain or look at whatever. So I commissioned a study. A couple of partners formed a task force, and they went and did research on it, and they kind of made a proposal to the board. And I was always against it, but in a firm which is a democratic partnership, you got to hear the partners out and so on.
Sure.
And what happened is that it passed in the board. So I still remember we have 3-day board meetings.
Yes.
So first day this was on the agenda, it passed by a quite narrow majority, but it passed. And I couldn't sleep, and I said, this is something wrong here. So while the board had made that decision, I came back the next day and I said that, listen, while it has been approved, and move of such magnitude cannot be just approved by a small majority of the board. If we really want to do it, we must get a consensus amongst partners. And so we had a discussion again,
Right.
and basically concluded that there was not, while there may have been a majority support, there was not enough support. There is not enough there to change the firm in such a fundamental way. And we rejected that proposal. There was another vote and we rejected it. That was quite a defining moment. Another defining moment was when everybody started saying there are all these successful .coms, they don't have the cash to pay, we must take equity and so on. And I thought, yes, perhaps because these are leaders of tomorrow, we should help them. But there were some issues that really troubled me. One was that we were creating potential competitors to our clients. How do we take ownership in a company and we serve their we are supposed to be neutral.
Absolutely.
So that issue bothered me. And so, one way to get around that was to generally take a small stake. But the most important way was I said, whatever we do, if we take some part of our fees in equity, that will go to a blind pool. That will not be known by the client service teams of that, as well as any other company that is related to it, or a competitor or a collaborator or whatever. Nobody will know. It will be a blind pool. And when we get rid of it or not get rid of it, we keep it, we sell it to somebody, is going to be managed by this group. So we ensure that. And then there was another issue that bothered me, which was that suppose we have a windfall gain. Who does it belong to? Does it belong to the current partners of the firm? Does it belong to the partners who built this capability and built the firm? Does it belong to future partners?
Sure.
Who does it belong to? And I thought the best way to avoid it actually is not to have a windfall gain.
Mm-hmm.
So on any arrangements we made a cap. I said we have to have a cap.
I remember reading that, yes.
And there was a case the Telefonica started a digital business, and we helped them serve it and so on, and we had equity in that.
Right.
And at one point, we'd capped it at 10 million.
Right.
Whatever the thing is, we probably provided services of, let's say, 5 million, and we said 10 million. And at one time it was worth several hundred million. And my partners would say, and I in the end, I didn't regret it at all, because, and in the end it ended up that it was only our entire fees at risk, or entire fees in form of equity, was less than 1% of our billing. And that was okay. It enabled us to serve some new innovative companies, but didn't put the basic value system at risk. That was the second one. Third one was when all these consulting firms came up, like Sapient and this and that. And the issue was whether we should go public and cash in, and I had the same issue. We will go public. Who should be the beneficiary? I mean, we have a system where only active partners are shareholders. So there's no shareholding from the founders of the firm or generations that built the firm. So how is it fair that the current generation cashes in on it and gives nothing to the previous generation, leaves nothing for the future generation?
Right.
It didn't make any sense to me. So I said, well, if you want to do that, you have to elect a new managing director. I'm not going to support it.
Right. But some would argue that in some ways raises larger questions about what you call the value system, because McKinsey had if you follow Martin Barr's philosophy, you're positioning yourself to be the trusted advisor, independent trusted advisor.
Right.
But if you start taking equity, that in some ways is slightly dodgy.
Completely, and that's why we restricted it to very small companies who couldn't, we restricted it to, we created a committee that would vet every. So we tried to build all safeguards and yet be a little in the modern economy.
But that's the thing, that you have the talent to really serve your clients well. But if the focus shifts towards creating wealth or creating money out of money, as it were, some people call it that, does that in some ways diffuse your focus on?
But it wasn't like that. Like we got a little bit of equity from some people we served, we put it in a pool. Nobody even knew whether we had sold it or didn't sell it.
I agree. I understand the structures. I'm saying that suddenly the conversation shifts towards other vehicles of how to make more money instead of service.
It was actually enabling client service. It was not about it. In the sense of saying clients would come and say, good companies, right, who were making a difference in the marketplace, they'll come and say, we really need your help, but we do not have the cash to pay you.
No, that I understand. But internally, was there some amount of a mission drift creeping in?
Not really. No, because in the end, when we, the reality was that when we took equity from, let's say, 100 small startups and so on, in the end, I'm not sure we made any money at it. And nor was there a great expectation that there was a windfall in one situation. But
Sure.
No, think about it. It was less than 1% of our fees. It didn't.
No, not so much at the firm level, but I'm saying at an individual level, did the focus kind of shift to salaries, bonuses, and trying to make more wealth rather than focus on...
No, I don't think so. No, I don't believe that.
Because thanks to Bain, there was pressure in some ways to...
No, that's the private equity, which is a different side.
Yeah, sure.
That's a different kind
Sure.
that's why I segmented into 3 different issues.
Sure. But if you also look at the pressures that globalization brought on, there was a attempt to try and expand the firm as well, the footprint, and in some ways open up new practices and see that you have the same level of quality across the world. How easy or difficult was that, because you were kind of helming it?
That was a challenge. If we wanted to be state of the art, we had to be at least as global as our clients, if not more. So there was no choice. It required the kind of resources that we could mobilize, but didn't necessarily have the conviction before. And one of my goals was to evangelize that idea that we have to be more global than our clients, and we have to be everywhere, present in every major economy. So that became an accepted idea, and then we expanded quite dramatically. But we did expand not through acquisitions, not through hiring senior people. We would put a team of people who take how India was started.
Sure.
Tinu Puri and Ranjit Pandit and few others, they came here. We didn't acquire a firm. We didn't do anything like that. We brought in 5 or 6 experienced hands, some new hands, and then started building it ground up. We did that everywhere, same formula.
But how do you balance these two things? One is, and I'm sure there must be a way to do it, and you offer that perspective. But at one level, you're pressing on the accelerator in terms of expanding the firm's footprint, opening up offices across the world. At the same time, and therefore to make those offices viable, you've got to get clients in. How do you balance this whole issue of doing great work for clients and at the same time acquiring new business? That's always a slightly difficult balancing act, is it?
No, I think it's a false choice you're describing, because in order to serve many of our clients well, we had to be in many of these markets.
Sure.
So it's not, if I want to do really quality work, I need to have a global footprint.
Right.
Because my clients are facing issues that are global in nature.
Sure.
there are leading enterprises being created in economies like India and China. We have an aspiration to serve the leading companies in the world. So if we are not present there, we are not serving
Sure.
a bunch of the leading
But
companies.
would you believe that the pace of the growth and the expansion was perhaps a tad too quick?
Well, some people have said that, but my belief was, and I still stand by that, is that one should grow in terms of number of consultants, or
Yeah.
somewhere between 5 and 10%. In different years, it will be different.
That's a thumb rule.
That's my
Fair enough.
judgment. And in terms of revenues, depending on what the inflation rate is, typically it will be like 5 points over that or something, global. So 15% growth in revenues, or maybe maximum 20% or something like that. That's what we did. I mean, if you look at in my 9 years, we little more than doubled the people count. So 9 years, a little more than doubled is probably 7%, 6%.
But what's starting to worry people, and even now, last year, about some of the things that happened in South Africa. One hears McKinsey kind of pushing the frontiers, even in seemingly totalitarian, governments as well. So that would lead people to start believing that, hey, something's amiss in the cultural coordinates. This whole the push for more business scale and size, has that?
I don't know. I'm not in touch with the firm right now. I was saddened to read about the current press coverage of McKinsey. I'm quite sad about it, because it points to things, a firm that I don't recognize in some ways. Now, there may be isolated incidents or whatever, I don't know.
I'll kind of quickly fast forward to your stint at Harvard and larger questions around the future of business education, because I think that's, I'm sure, where your passion also lies. Assume you were asked to, given your experience, redesign the whole leadership course at Harvard today, right, where we stand. What new perspectives would you really add so that the graduates really have a far better handle on what to cope with the kind of world that we're kind of heading into?
I don't, leadership per se, and the what undermines the skills that undermine it, or the concepts or the ideas, are not that they change very fast. I mean, it's probably, was true 2,000 years ago and it's true today. So you can think about, a core set of values that you must have, the idea that, in many times you basically are very effective if you lead from behind, the idea that there must be, mentoring and coaching and a safety net below people you're trying to develop, making other people successful, that will in turn make the leader much more successful. So there are many ideas, and we can go on and on about them.
Sure.
They're timeless.
Right. So if you were asked to come in and do the commencement address at ISB, let's say, for instance,
Yes.
what are the one or two things that you would tell students of today? The same things that you just spoke about, or given the experiences that you've had?
No. So, I let's tell you what comes to my top of my mind. I mean, you're starting a career, right? You're starting going out into the world. The first thing I'd say is, don't worry about your career. Worry about becoming great at what you do,
Right.
becoming a great professional. Your learning mindset, this lifelong learning. It's a little bit like, if you become a great professional, you'll automatically have career success.
Absolutely.
It's a bit like, don't worry about the results, but worry about what you are putting in. That's the first thing I would say.
Sure.
Second thing I'd say is, get yourself out of the comfort zone. If you're very comfortable, you've been doing the same thing and you're excellent at it and all this type of stuff, and it's been 3-5 years doing that, do something else.
Right.
Just get yourself out of the comfort zone, learn something new, deal with more uncertainty, etc.
Right.
I would say work with people, make other people successful. You have no idea how much they will make you successful. It's sort of the Buddhist principle, what goes around comes around.
Right. Yeah, I have a follow-up question to that, because you've had almost, I wouldn't call them crossovers or transitions, because you've lived those pieces while you were doing many other things, consulting career, your work with the social causes, as well as the post-McKinsey era as well. Now, not too many people are able to straddle so many different things. So what did you learn? What are the lessons from there that people need to be careful about in terms of managing career transitions or crossovers? Easier said than done, right? I know your wife had lots of comments to make on that as well.
No, I've never really learned to say no. So I always
jump in,
help wherever I can. If I'm not making a contribution, I withdraw. But if I can make a contribution, I like to make it. And I think that's one thing to watch. You can easily get overcommitted, especially if you have a career in McKinsey, you're a natural problem solver. That's what you do every day, day in and day out. If you're a successful, team leader and a consensus builder, which you have to do is convincing clients and so on, you have natural people skills. So, I am able to bring together many coalitions that people would say it's impossible, you can't get all these people together. Now, this is not to pat myself on the back, I'm just saying this is so then you can make a contribution in so many different fronts.
That's what you'll leverage.
That you get either diluted or overcommitted. You got to watch out for that.
But what is remarkable is the ability to manage, say, what one would call the divorce set in some ways, and get along well with inmates at a correctional facility. How on earth did you be able to straddle those two words?
Oh, but even before that, I mean, in public health, I was a chairman of the Global Fund. I would go around in, villages in Africa looking at what the malaria program is and talking to the NGOs and the various people who make interventions in creating village camps for, you name it. In a way, the interesting thing is to apply business skills that you learned in other very important, even more important societal issues.
Right.
That's the trick, I think.
And this is the final question. Do you think the global elite in some ways, do you think they're doing enough to really address a lot of the social, the complex challenges that you're talking about?
Of course. No, I admire Bill Gates because he's really doing a phenomenal thing. He's not only a great businessman, but he's a great philanthropist. And he engages personally in the issues and problems. A lot more people could do a lot more. And they are very talented, they have lots of resources. Why not? In the end, you get a lot more satisfaction out of doing something like that than you would build another business, I think.
Right, but there too there is a lot of public debate about the role of philanthropists, global philanthropists like Gates.
There is, and there's a fair amount of criticism. But I am more, if you can do something, do it. Yes, there'll always be skeptics. There'll always be. Are we better off in this world having a Gates Foundation? My clear answer is yes. Having been involved with them quite a lot.
Sure. Rajat, on that note, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome. Thank you.